Twitter enlisting its users to fact-check misleading tweets by joining Twitter's new feature, Birdwatch, where members can add notes to rebut false or misleading posts and even rate the reliability of the fact-checking annotations from other Birdwatch users. That feature, which would be in practice somewhat like Wikipedia, would give the community power to protect information on Twitter. Let's take a look at the platform's introduction video to that Birdwatch feature.
Okay, that's a lot, that music especially. Back to talk about it, Democratic strategist, owner of JC Strategies, Jennifer Holdsworth-Karp, and Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard. Rachel, let's start with you. You literally run an organization against big tech. This is basically an ad for your organization. What do you make of this? What the hell could go wrong, right? Contributing community fact-checking. I can't imagine how it could screw up on the world's worst platform.
You want to make Twitter a bigger dumpster fire. I think you've just picked how to do it. So I think it's wrong to actually compare this to something like Wikipedia, because when you look at Wikipedia, there are sort of resource sharing norms about community, right? You're actually marginally, at least, trying to create a forum where knowledge is shared. Mm-hmm. Twitter is not that. Twitter is for dunking on people, right? Mm-hmm. Twitter is for sort of partisan flame throwing. You are about to take that and give it the veneer of fact checking, right? My understanding of how this program works is that users vote for the fact check they like most. And so you are literally going to create an industry, right? Yeah. Where people exist just to click and make sure their version of events sees light of day. And by the way, I would say on that first fact check when they're like whales are robots funded by the government, isn't that just like a submarine? Isn't a submarine a government created whale? Fact check. I have fact
It's
check.
one of those galaxy brain memes that I'm just thinking of.
We're going to dig into that in a future segment, ladies. The whales funded by government research. Jen, what do you think of this? Because, I mean, to me, Rachel seems right. It seems like another way to encourage people on Twitter to be even more obnoxious and annoying and engage in this, herd-like behavior and shaming.
No, this is a disaster waiting to happen. I mean, they even, in the bottom of the description, they're talking about making sure that there's a control mechanism so that, Rachel, what you just said doesn't happen. But of course it's going to happen. It's designed to happen. This is another instance of the public asking big tech to do something and them answering with the complete wrong solution, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, please give us an edit button. Here's a different way to retweet, right? They never listen to what the community is saying that is going to make the platform better. I don't know if there's much you can do to Twitter to make it better other than to make it go away. But I think this is just not a good solution. I'm not pretending that I know everything about how it's going to work, but voting on facts, I think, is the worst possible way to help disinformation on big tech platforms.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. Rachel, obviously they are trying to, quell some of the criticism against them, misinformation, etc. I mean, what would actually be a solution to something like this? I know you've thought a lot about this from a policy perspective.
Well, I mean, a number of things, but I think at the basic premise here, and Republicans and Democrats kind of differ on this, but the answer to bad speech and misleading speech is actually just more speech. Mm-hmm. And the more I think these big tech platforms crack down on, who can speak and who can hear and what can be said, I just think they put their business model at risk. But two, I think they're begging for the type of regulation or repeal of, for instance, Section 230, which is their immunity, which would give users private right of action against them. Can you imagine the dumpster fire that would result when Twitter is sued by its users for blocking tweets? So, we have these are almost common carrier platforms. I think the right and left is sort of recognizing that. And so I wouldn't be surprised in the next 4 or 5 years if you see a general consensus towards saying, okay, an affirmative recognition that this is our virtual public square. There must be common carrier regulations, which, will have different effects on speech and what users can say and do. But in the end, it might actually be the thing that saves us from each other, from destroying each other online.
Yeah, I think that's
Jen, to me, this seems like an attempt for them to have their cake and eat it too, right? They're getting all these demands for like increased censorship and blocking more accounts and all of that, which I oppose. I don't know what your view is on all of that. But they want to sort of give a nod to that and say we're doing more without actually having the responsibility of their own decision making. Now they can just pawn it off onto the users.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm actually a Democrat that wholeheartedly supports repealing Section 230 of the CDA. I've supported it for a long time. I actually, in another role, am a human trafficking advocate, and this has been an issue for a long time in that community. But without the responsibility of, what goes on the platform, they don't have real incentive to control it in the right way. And when I use the word control, I don't mean decide which content goes up there, but really find an effective way to combat misinformation. Now, I think that there is a line that you can't cross. What former President Donald Trump did was a black and white line that you can't cross. And I think they did the right thing by removing him. There were reports that misinformation dropped exponentially when he was removed from the platform. But I think it has to be reserved for an extreme example like that. They cannot use it willy-nilly and deplatform various people just because they don't like what they're saying. That has to be an extreme example. And I think that they're copping out by turning it over to the community instead of taking the responsibility of themselves and standing strong, but also being clear in their community standards. I think that there's a lot of wishy-washiness in their community standards. A number of times, women will report harassment online on various platforms, and they get some form message back like, oh, this doesn't violate our community standards because some AI bot decided that that wasn't harassment. They need to make sure that they're filling out their ranks with folks who are really paying attention to this. If not, we're gonna get nonsense like this community interaction.
Rachel, just respond to that quickly, because I disagree on the merits of, I actually don't think that Trump should have been permanently banned from Twitter, even though I acknowledge that it has been like better for everyone that he's been gone, because I think of the longer precedent that this sets, and we've already seen a lot of left-wing groups also being banned on platforms like Twitter and Facebook. But I think Jen's point about how these standards are applied really willy-nilly is the appropriate one. Like, if you had a clear standard that was consistently applied that led to Trump being permanently banned for Twitter, I could be okay with that. But the problem is that it seems like it's all done on an ad hoc basis, subject to a lot of sort of like public pressure and viewpoints that they just don't like. And then there's an attempt to like clean it up on the end. Let's just ban some left-wing people to show that we're fair and balanced. It seems like it is done in a very ad hoc, willy-nilly way, to use Jen's language.
This is the central complaint, I think, from a lot of conservatives as well, is that none of these standards are, one, clear, or two, equally applied. And I think this is actually a lot of the frustration conservatives have with Parler getting kicked off of every avenue for being a successful business. Because, okay, you're going to say Parler was involved in organizing January 6th. Well, we know Facebook and Twitter were as well, and they have much broader reaches than Parler. So, why are you treating them differently? But I think, to your point, if these standards were clear and evenly applied, this would be a different conversation. But when you have so much power over speech, over retail, over access to capitalism, really centralized in these companies, and then they weaponize that power in political ways, you have, you have an oligarchy, essentially. You have plutocracy. And that is what I think a lot of the objection stems from. Because, again, these aren't just speech platforms. They are really market access platforms. They have a ton of power. And when it's unaccountable like this and it's weaponized politically, the last thing I'll say is, the negative impact I think this has on our politics is, you saw it. Michelle Obama didn't go to Congress to complain about Trump. She didn't go to Trump himself. She went to big tech and said, take him off the platform. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't like a tweet of hers that was circulating from December where she said, protests should make people uncomfortable. Her comms director publicly appealed to have that taken down. So if our politics is just going to distill to begging corporations to like remove words we don't like, then we have a bigger problem. Because, that is not democracy. That is essentially corporations doing the bidding of one political party, and you don't survive in a self-government that way.
I completely agree with that. All right, guys, really good conversation.
Really thoughtful,
Appreciate
ladies.
it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
A resolution is calling now for the resignation of the Massachusetts Democratic Party chair over the handling of the Alex Morse investigation. It's turned ugly during a committee meeting. Ryan Grimm is going to join us with the details and the latest in this crazy saga when Rising continues.